So Connie, in addition to what we're doing for customers, I know as leading up the marketing department, you've got an interesting use of AI, generative AI, specifically within Caylent. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're trying to do with generative AI.
Yeah, so recently we just launched our new website, and we've always been talking about including a chatbot, right? But there are so many types of chatbots out there where you go to it and you're like, hi, I'd like to speak to someone, and it would just generate something that is completely canned. Like, I want something that actually talks to you like a human. And I feel like with a chatbot leveraging generative AI, we can pull in data sources not only from just our website, but from our social networks, and looking through all the videos that we've created to actually be able to answer the question that a user has inputted into the chat space.
Oh, that's really interesting, because I feel like when I see a chatbot on a website, I'm actively avoiding them because they're typically like the keywords, it's hard to follow. It's like dealing with a phone tree. So you're thinking about a bot that's a little bit more conversational, that's a little bit more like dealing with one of your team members on the marketing team or branding and really understands Caylent and can talk to a customer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like we've all dealt with chatbots before, right? Like half the time when we get about 2 questions in, they're like, let me connect you to a representative. And then you're sitting there waiting for however long. But like, I just imagine, like, with the inventions that are going on with generative AI, like, I really believe that it's almost going to be like speaking to a human, and they'd be just as knowledgeable as an actual human behind the keyboard that's answering this chat.
Right, so I have good news for you. It turns out we actually have an application pattern that can solve that. So before we jump into that though, just to set a base expectation, I know people are working with ChatGPT and having fun with it and making poems and doing all kinds of things, making it talk like a pirate and all these other use cases, right? But that model and others like it aren't necessarily trained on Caylent, right? There was no reason for it to be very specific to Caylent. However, one of the approaches that we're taking to customizing those large language models without retraining them, an efficient approach to that is to use a technique called retrieval augmented generation. Now that's a fancy term for essentially prompting the chatbot with more information that's very specific to Caylent. So if I wanted to ask about Caylent's offerings, we could prompt that chatbot with the idea of our catalysts that we have that help accelerate customer experience. And so with that, we take the conversational abilities of a large language model and we add the knowledge, if you will, of Caylent and help summarize and have conversations with clients and hopefully give them much more useful information, also tie back to primary sources. So if we're going to talk about Caylent's enhanced control tower catalyst, we can link back to the page and do interesting things like that. So I think the time of the chatbot that you're dreaming of is coming along. It's just a matter of getting a little time from our developers to put something together for you.
Now, if we're actually thinking about architecting this, what kind of work needs to go into it? Like, what type of, I would say, talent do we need to create this? And like, generally, how long would it take? Is it something that we can buy out of the box to do?
Today, there are a few frameworks that are closer to out of the box, but there's a little bit of work from the technical staff in terms of making sure that we collect all that data and we're able to index it. What you would talk about in terms of generative AI is creating embeddings, which is essentially a numerical representation of the data in these documents, and then storing those in a vector database. Use that to search. So we're getting into some technical nitty-gritty, but that's the kinds of things like our cloud native applications team would do, our data engineering team. There's a little bit of blend of their skill sets to prepare that. But there's also a prompt engineering aspect to tune the chatbot to the type of brand voice that you'd like it to have and the kinds of interactions that you'd like it to have with customers. So there's a couple of different roles that play a part in that.
Got it. And I do remember in traditional ML, when you have to introduce a new data source, you might need to retrain the model. Like, is that an issue?
That's the nice thing about this approach. That's actually a really insightful question. The nice thing about this approach is that as new data comes in, we're essentially updating not the model itself, but the contextual information that we're feeding to the model to summarize for our users' conversations. So it's nice not to have to retrain, especially in the case of a large language model that can be hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to train. We don't have the budget for that, but indexing one new document as it's added to the website is extremely cost efficient. So it's a really nice way to do that.
And outside of documents, because I want to be able to input different types of data sources, are there any limitations to the type of data sources that we use for this model?
For this use case, it'd be textual sources. So you'd want some structure around it so that there's the ability for the model to sort of summarize and understand it in terms of English language, but that's basically what you're talking about when you talk about things like from Slack or from other use cases that might show up in marketing. Those textual use cases are really easily handled by this kind of a model.
Now say I wanted to add in video and audio text, because we have a bunch of podcasts as well as for instance, the video that we're filming now and some of the other videos that we've done, even webinars that we've done and recorded speaking engagements. There's a lot of good information there, and I feel like that could definitely add to the knowledge base of the chatbot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the short term, I think what you'll see is that transcripts of those kinds of things, metadata about the video, rather than having a native understanding of the video itself, is going to be your fastest mode to production. But what we do see with the generative AI space is a convergence on multimodal models, which can understand text and video and images as well. So I don't think we're there today for what you want to do, but if we use the tools that we have, generate a transcript of your video, we can determine that hey, this might be relevant for this user's query, point them in the right direction. So I think we can make it look good on from the user experience perspective. I think the back end right now isn't just one answer. It's going to be a combination of pieces that our development and data teams can put together to accomplish the solutions you're looking for.
Now say that the answer the chatbot spit out was completely not useful to the user. Mm-hmm. How are we able to see that or react to that and change it, or how is that modeled? How are we able to see that it said something wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a couple of ways to do that. One of the obvious ways that you may have seen in experiences that you've had is the idea of was this answer useful? Thumbs up, thumbs down. So that gives you a basically human feedback to understand as to whether the chatbot's on the right track or not. If it's not useful, we can redirect that user either potentially to a live person, or we can sort of restart the conversation, if you will, try again with the chatbot. But also the key would be behind the scenes also logging that information, understanding that Connie had a bad experience with the chatbot, she gave it a thumbs down. What was the history of that interaction, and can we tune the prompts that the chatbot has got to lead it to a better answer in the future if they get those same kinds of questions?
Okay, that's probably one of my bigger fears, right? It's the chatbot is spitting out something that's completely not useful, the person getting very frustrated. Mm-hmm. But if we're able to have some guardrails in place, or something that lets us know that a customer had a bad experience on the chatbot, and us being able to adjust the outputs from the prompts, then that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think your whole point is to try to improve the user experience using our website, right? You want to come away with happy users. If we introduce automation or a chatbot that purports to make them happier, we want to measure that it does and make sure that we're tuning it with that in mind. But absolutely a best practice to consider that.
Is there anything that I should be concerned about with generative AI? Speaking back to our customers?
I think the biggest thing is the one that you brought up, is making sure that they feel the information is useful, that we're getting truthful information back. So I think a little bit of that becomes the development and testing cycle, making sure our users are throwing curveballs at the bot and understanding how it reacts in those situations. So again, a best practice in the way that we would roll out generative AI for customers, we would do the same thing internally for Caylent use cases.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, having the entire company test out our chatbot.
Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah.